clear end to this. The status quo is not good enough, and that's what I'm worried about.
As the nation focused on New York, the epicentre of America's outbreak, a new hotbed has silently emerged.
We're on a path to look like Italy, and we need to prepare for that.
Louisiana is now home to the largest number of coronavirus patients per capita, behind New York and Washington state. A recent Mardi Gras festival in New Orleans is thought to have contributed to the spread.
You can manufacture masks, you can create more beds. What you can't manufacture is workforce. You can make a mask in a day, you can't make a pulmonary critical care doc in a day.
65 people have died in Louisiana. There are fears the hospital system there could collapse by April. Congress is taking steps to lessen the blow. Last night, the US Senate passed a $3.6 trillion relief package to help American workers and business. But it won't stop the jobless rate rising. 3.3 million Americans filed unemployment claims last week, a tenfold increase on the week before.
It's a lot of jobs, but I think we'll come back very strong. The sooner we get back to work, every day that we stay out, it gets harder to bring it back very quickly.
Business has basically completely ground to a halt.
Australian Michael Condren is a photographer in New York City. He and his wife now have no income.
Anything more than 3 months and we're in trouble. Anything that puts money in the hands of people to be able to, support their local businesses or to pay their rent or their mortgage, it's extremely helpful.
Despite the stark numbers, Wall Street surged for the third time this week, a sign investors believe the cash handouts will go some way towards blunting the economic impact. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Washington.
China has recorded its first locally transmitted case in 3 days as the situation in Europe continues to deteriorate. In Italy, cases have now exceeded 80,000, with the death toll climbing to more than 8,200. Spain has seen a steep increase in cases and deaths too. In the UK, Britain has recorded its worst day with more than 100 deaths in a single 24-hour period. People across England have taken part in so-called Clap for Carers tribute, taking to balconies and windows to applaud healthcare workers dealing with the pandemic.
Very, very thankful for everything you're doing.
In China, Beijing is clamping down on international arrivals, ordering airlines to cut flights. That's after it recorded 54 new imported cases. According to Chinese authorities, it's only had one case of local transmission in 3 days. Japan has also brought in travel restrictions after 47 positive tests in Tokyo triggered fears of a second wave of coronavirus infections. To finance, investors in Australia did not follow the lead from Wall Street. The local market succumbed to another day of selling. Here's Philip Lasker.
Well, Wall Street's massive recovery, which has seen it surge more than 20% this week, played well throughout Asia. All that money being thrown around by governments is encouraging investors, and so we saw rises in Europe, Japan and Hong Kong. There was no vote of confidence here, though, as investors sought to take profits while the virus continues to spread. Australia is still a long way from bull market territory, but we can say it was up for the week. Commercial landlords who were in for a rough time fell sharply, and so did the banks. Charter Hall and Scentre Group took a hammering. Energy companies were also sold off. In fact, oil demand is in free fall. Here are the expectations before and after the coronavirus. Analysts say consumption has dropped between 15 and 20 million barrels a day because of the coronavirus and the price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. The Prime Minister's message that this is a Team Australia moment doesn't seem to have filtered through to the petrol retailers. The gap between wholesale and retail petrol prices is the widest this year. Another reason to stay home. There's been a spike in people studying up on economic depressions. Not quite as many as during the global financial crisis, though. You thought a recession was bad. Here's your quick depression guide. GDP nearly minus 10%, inflation minus 11%, and unemployment peaking not far off 20%. We're expecting to get at least halfway there, which will be painful enough. The Australian dollar is back above 61 US cents, and that's finance.
The top stories on ABC News. All travellers arriving from overseas will be forced into isolation in hotels and other facilities for 14 days from midnight tomorrow. Defence Force personnel will also be brought in to support state and territory police to monitor people self-isolating. The announcement came after the National Cabinet, which is made up of the Prime Minister and state and territory leaders, met via teleconference. The Federal Parliament is considering ways for businesses to effectively go into hibernation during the coronavirus outbreak and reopen once the crisis is over. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost their job this week, and many businesses have closed their doors after wide-ranging social restrictions were put in place to curb the spread of the virus through the community. It's been suggested rents could be frozen or suspended. Melbourne's Alfred Hospital has limited access to its oncology and haematology ward after discovering 4 inpatients had COVID-19. 2 of those patients have died and 2 remain in hospital. The Alfred says 3 staff members have since tested positive for COVID-19 and other staff are in self-isolation. And the United States now has the highest number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the world, surpassing both Italy and China. At least 85,000 people in the United States have contracted the virus, with more than 1,000 dead from the disease. The state of New York is the worst affected, and there are fears hospitals there will be overwhelmed. The Prime Minister has announced strict quarantine measures for all overseas arrivals from midnight tomorrow in an effort to further control the spread of the coronavirus. We were expecting to hear measures to further help businesses and tenants deal with the pandemic after today's meeting of the National Cabinet. Details of those measures are now expected in the coming days. Here's what was announced this afternoon. All international arrivals will now be forced to carry out their 14-day self-isolation in hotels and other facilities designated by the government. Travellers will be quarantined at the point of entry regardless of where they live, meaning if you reside in New South Wales but land in Melbourne, you will be quarantined in Victoria. Defence Force personnel will assist state and territory police in ensuring travellers comply. Scott Morrison says the new rules target the greatest area of concern.
2/3 of the cases that we currently have are from an Australian who has come home. 2/3. That is very different to what we're seeing in other parts of the world. Our biggest issue, the biggest number of cases, relate to this. And as time has gone on, the risk of those who are returning from other parts of the world actually increases because more countries have the virus. Where Australians have been, they've been there for longer, and they've been more exposed. And so we're going to take further measures today to strengthen the enforcement of the self-isolation that is put in place for people returning through our airports in particular.
Let's take a look at some of the other coronavirus stories from today. There are now close to 3,200 confirmed cases in Australia, with the number of global infections exceeding 500,000. And the virus is continuing to spread. 13 people have died, including 3 men in their 70s yesterday, 2 in Victoria and 1 from Perth. A major life insurer says new policies will not cover payouts to frontline doctors who die from COVID-19. It's understood the exclusion clause could also cover asthmatics, people over the age of 50 and those with lung disease. New South Wales Police have begun fining businesses and people who are failing to follow laws relating to COVID-19. The US now has more confirmed cases of coronavirus than any other country, with more than 85,000 positive tests. And leaders of the G20 countries say they'll inject $8 trillion into the global economy to tackle the fallout from the pandemic. During a virtual summit, they also promised robust support for developing nations. 2 commercial charter flights are being arranged